Welcome back to autumnal Washington in the lee of Capitol Hill. There all the action is tonight. Here's a fact which brings home just how important these elections are and how much is at stake. They are the most expensive elections ever, more than £2 billion spent so far. That's even more than was spent in the presidential election 2 years ago. All this in an America where 15 million are employed, where 1 in 7 live below the poverty line. All that cash has stoked a frenetic and at times furious campaign, and beneath it all, the fear of millions of ordinary Americans for whom the rhetoric of Barack Obama has lost its allure. I've been talking to some of them. Virginia's timely pumpkin haul provides a misleading sense of well-being. Beyond the sunny orange skins and happy families, the battered labour market from which Bobby Richard hires his staff says it all.
We have had our pick. We didn't have to advertise anything. We had thousands of people apply. We've got PhDs, we've got unemployed college lecturers, we've got people packing pumpkins and frying hot dogs and things that you just wouldn't believe.
Virginia is prosperous middle-class territory, which Obama won back for the Democrats 2 years ago and may lose today. For even here, Americans are hurting as they're voting.
We came down here for jobs because we both got laid off where we were, but even down here, the price of living here is a lot.
My concerns being a 60-year-old grandfather are that I may very well have Social Security, but my children here may not, and my grandson may not. You know, the future of the country I'm most concerned about for their sakes.
So whatever the outward and still visible sign of plenty, Americans are losing confidence and beginning to disbelieve hope. There is a genuine fear that the sun is somehow beginning to set on this vast economy, that globalization is somehow undermining America's can forever do identity. But this is still countered on an autumn evening on the peaceful campus of Howard University, the black citadel of learning on the outskirts of the capital. This is the very hall in which I stood with 2,000 African-American students as Obama seized the presidency 2 years ago this Thursday. Did you not think it could happen?
I never thought in my lifetime that it would happen, but it happened tonight. It's a reality and we did it. America is now more united. We did it.
2 years on, for students who were there that night, hope still lives, but you were in that hall.
I was in that hall, yes.
What about 2 years on? How do you feel now?
I mean, I'm not as excited because it's kind of worn off a little bit, but I'm still excited whenever I watch TV and I sit there and I say, man, like, we really have a black president. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we really, truly have a black president.
When you think about it, we've come actually a nice little distance from where we were before. It's not going to change overnight.
But travel to Lafayette Square, right in front of the White House, the walls of a radical conservative think tank upon which the Obama's bedroom window looks out, screams it, jobs. Just around the corner sits the Cato Institute, yet one more of Washington's resurgent free market campaign centers. So, is it Obama himself or his policies they resent?
I think the agenda that he's pushed is one that has really turned voters off. Obviously, he had a landslide victory just a couple years ago, so it didn't seem like the public was hostile to him as an individual or even some of his policies. But as he started to enact some of these policies, the stimulus bill, and then like I knew he would, he's been very successful and very committed to expanding the size of the government domestically, which I certainly did not approve of.
But it's the president's loyalist critics who bind economic hard times irrevocably to Obama himself. Velma Hart made what has become a defining intervention at a town hall meeting.
And I'm one of your middle-class Americans. And quite frankly, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted of defending you, defending your administration, defending the mantle of change that I voted for, and deeply disappointed with where we are right now.
Velma believes hope led to unreal expectation. She came to see us on our Washington rooftop. This mother of two, working for an Army veterans charity, is indeed disappointed. You're feeling this despair, in a sense.
No despair. That's too deep a word.
No, but
I said deeply disappointed.
Yes, deeply disappointed, and deeply disappointed to be keep defending him.
Yeah.
If you're feeling this disappointment,
yeah,
Can you imagine how people who never supported him in the first place are thinking?
No, I don't imagine how they're thinking, because that's not the space I live in. What I will say to you is that for me, the disappointment runs much deeper than my disappointment in him. It's a disappointment in the system that's failing all of us. It's a disappointment that is bigger than a man. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, here we are on our Washington roof. Our Washington correspondent Sarah Smith is with me. Sarah, Velma's right. I mean, this is much bigger than just Obama, this crisis of confidence in which this election is being fought.
Certainly, and the approval ratings for all politicians are incredibly low. Voters are extremely unhappy, and they're not just blaming the president, they're blaming pretty much everyone in Washington, and there's one simple reason for that. The unemployment rate is at nearly 10% in this country, and it doesn't show any signs of coming down soon. Now, that's a number that would be terrible for any president at this point in his term, but it's particularly bad for one who promised hope and change. I've spoken to so many voters during this campaign who tell me they voted for change 2 years ago, but the only change they've seen is things getting worse. Add to that the fact that the president has done a really poor job of selling his side of the story on the economy, and you can see where the problem is.
And then, of course, in this very confusing race in which, as you say, everybody hates everybody really, and it's been extremely bitter, you have the Tea Party. You have this third force that is within one of the parties, within the Republican Party, and nobody knows what effect it's really going to have.
Yeah, the Tea Party is like an insurgency within the Republican Party. They're very conservative, they're driven by the grassroots, not by the party leadership, and they make the party leadership really quite nervous, actually, because nobody knows how many votes they're going to get, whether a huge number of Tea Party candidates are going to end up here in Washington next year, and if they do, how it will change Congress, because these are candidates who've gone and promised the voters that they will come to Washington and say no to pretty much anything President Obama wants to do, particularly if it involves spending any money. They even want to try and repeal some of the major legislation he's passed already, starting with his healthcare reform. So it's going to be a very contentious time over in Congress.
And so when we come to add up everything at the end of it, we won't really know quite who's in the ascendancy.
Well, the Republican Party may end up at war with itself in this Congress if there are a lot of Tea Party candidates there. It's going to be difficult for the Democrats, whatever happens. It's not necessarily going to be easy for the Republican Party.
Sarah Smith, and we'll be off to watch the final voting any minute now. It'll be clocking in until well past midnight your time. We're back tomorrow with the full results. We'll be talking to leading Democrats and Republicans and asking what does this mean for those of us who live outside the United States. Join us at 7. Until then, for all of us here in Washington, Krishnan in London with Samira, that's Channel 4 News. Good evening.